Should you be panicking with the Bitcoin price being below $89,000? And I just want to kind of talk about what I think is going on and just kind of give you my kind of strategy of what I've been doing. So those that don't know, I've been in crypto since 2016. I've made a lot of mistakes and I've also done a lot of things right. And I've noticed a lot of trends going on when it comes to just the market sentiment and psychology. And I think that we're in a very uncertain time because obviously crypto, you can make the case that the 4-year cycle is over if you're somebody that trades based on technical analysis and the 4-year cycle theories and all that kind of stuff. And then you have the arguments where it's like liquidity driven, right? So you have these liquidity cycles that are basically, they follow the whole monetary policies and all that kind of stuff. And so there's people on both sides of the fence. And I think that both of them have a strong case to make, whether we're in a, bull market or a bear market. Now, obviously Bitcoin is negative on the year, so you could make the case that we've been in a bear market. However, I think that the broader picture is just, we've had very bad macro uncertainty. We've had a government shutdown for like record time. We have obviously inflation's kind of calming down, but it's not enough to where the Fed wants to just cut rates to zero. And they're just kind of in a weird place because obviously the jobs is just not doing well either. And so they have a dual mandate, which is basically like control inflation and make sure that people are employed. And so there's just a lot of just turmoil when it goes onto the markets. Now, short term, what I think is going to happen is obviously there's kind of like an unwinding, if you will, of these spot ETFs. There's probably like large entities that maybe lost a lot of money in this whole like October 10th liquidation event. Obviously, these people are kind of like, they are institutions, but they're like newbies at the end of the day. Like they're not really new to crypto. And so what happens is most of their clients, they buy all these kind of assets because they ride the hype. And so what normally happens is it's kind of like a double-edged sword because, when Bitcoin is super hot, everyone's trying to like FOMO into the markets. But when everything's bad, then everybody's rushing to sell. And so the pain of the selling pressure is much worse than the buying pressure. And so I think it's really worthwhile to kind of take a step back and just not panic so much. Obviously you want to be mostly in spots anyways. Like if you guys are not new to the channel, I always preach like, do not over leverage. If you are, be prepared to lose everything. And I only really do this when I'm doing like very low leverage or even just like hedge positions against my spot positions. And so pretty much the one thing that I have learned over the last couple 4-year cycles is every single time the hot narratives are always different every time around. And so you always want to position yourself in assets that are at least going to be around for the next cycle. And that's going to set you up for, not losing so much if we do continue this bearish trend, because, obviously we all know that Bitcoin is like the main character and it's actually been one of the like massive performers, right? It's gone from $15,000 to about $126,000. So amazing return. Solana, we saw it go from $250 last cycle all the way down to $9 and it hit about $300. So over a 30x return. Obviously, Ethereum has not done that much. It's kind of just gone like up, down, up, down, up, down. It's gone like what, 2 or 3x or something like that. Something ridiculous. That's not to say that it's not going to stay around and like, perform in the future. I still think that it has its place, but it's just been very underwhelming because, not a lot of people are really using Ethereum other than like stable coins, and like the major institutions are all talking about it. But, Solana's gone up a lot because of its whole like meme coin mania. And so like, basically creates buying pressure on top of Solana. Not to mention now we have a lot of like USDC integration, stable coins, spot ETFs, all that kind of stuff. And so I would just kind of caution, like whatever your investments are, you always want to prepare for the worst case scenario, and then always just be very greedy when it comes to considering taking profits, or at least removing your initial investment out so that you mitigate all of your risk. And so basically what I've been doing is, I started this, this particular 4-year cycle, I was buying, I think I probably bought like maybe 20 different altcoins. And so over time, I kind of just reduced that. And more recently, whenever the October 10th event kind of happened, luckily I wasn't in too much leverage. I did get washed on one of the trades, but it wasn't significant enough to where it really affected me. I really looked at the price action of most of these coins, and watching them go down so much kind of tells you that there's not really an underlying bid. They're kind of just propped up by leverage. And so that kind of tells me that, not a lot of people have faith in these kind of coins. And it's nothing like personal to the coins. I'm not going to name any, but it just kind of goes to show how fragile the space really is when it comes to liquidity and just, underlying demand. Because there's just so much more cryptos in circulation. And so you need to be more selective with whichever cryptos you're choosing to invest in. So I think that when it comes to your investments, you need to, again, pay attention to which ones have been, most dominant. So obviously you cannot deny that Bitcoin's been the main character. I think that Solana, whether you think it's good or bad or whatever the case may be, they've pretty much established themselves and they've came out of massive FUD. And so I do think that at the very minimum, they're going to stand the test of time because they're also integrating with stablecoins. Now, obviously Ethereum is also one of the major, like if not the biggest stablecoin issue, like blockchain, right? Because all these institutions want to build on top of it. They want to tokenize all of their assets. You have BlackRock that's like really, really bullish on them. You have Tommy Lee that's trying to buy up like 5 or 6% of the whole supply. So, that does show that there's going to be a lot of trust when it comes to Ethereum. And so if you're somebody that's like not really, trying to risk so much, but you want to have the upside of crypto, then you'd probably just want to look no further than Bitcoin, Solana, Ethereum. Now, again, that's not financial advice. Most people lose all their money and I can't tell you what to do, right? But those are the most safe investments that are at least going to appreciate in price if the crypto market continues to be bullish, and they'll be around in bear markets and next cycle. So that's kind of like where I would kind of tell most people to kind of stop and just not really worry about the rest, right? Obviously there's up and coming layer ones and all that kind of stuff, but you typically want to buy these whenever things are just super, super down. And you could make the case like, yeah, Bitcoin's down like $40,000 in the last like couple months. And so, technically speaking, is it a good time to maybe dollar cost average in some alts? Maybe. But, you always want to be prepared for the worst. And the best scenario that I kind of would do is like, last bull cycle, I had price targets that I wanted to accumulate at. And so you always want to take a dollar cost averaging approach or a value investing approach. So basically what that means is, obviously things are down for altcoins like 50 or 60%. Then I would maybe allocate hypothetically like 20 or 30% of whatever I wanted to buy into it. And then you just allocate that money, right? And then if it goes down another 15 or 20%, then you put in another, 20 or 30%, whatever, and so on and so forth, so that you bring your cost average down and you don't want to just, put everything right away because things can always go down. And I think that obviously if we can flip some bullish time frames, then that's going to allow for some sort of relief. And that's going to propel the altcoins up further. And I think that they'll move a lot quicker than Bitcoin just because of where we are in the cycle. We're kind of just running out of time, frankly speaking. So I'm just saying all that to say that you need to really think about your investing plan and see and notice how you've kind of been feeling throughout this whole downturn, because it's been very frustrating. And I think a lot of people feel like they made the wrong investing strategy because maybe they didn't take profits, maybe they didn't buy the right altcoins, maybe they don't have enough Bitcoin exposure. Because people that are mostly in Bitcoin, and I'm by no means a Bitcoin maxi, but people that tend to have a heavy Bitcoin portfolio, which is what I always recommend whenever you're in crypto, you're not feeling the pain as much as people that have just been holding meme coins. I have friends that have, they put $20,000 or $30,000 into the market only on basically like meme coins. And they saw that go up to like 200, 300, 500,000. And they pretty much round trip the whole thing, which means like they're essentially back to where they started. And that can be very frustrating because, obviously if you're not taking profits and all this kind of stuff, then it's really bad. So refine your investing strategy, look at the winners, and I would say just look to bet on those, right? Like don't be too overly greedy. And there's nothing wrong with taking profits because at the end of the day, if you have to take profits, that means you're doing something right. So let's just kind of like some words of wisdom, because I think that there's just so much panic going on in the market. And usually that's a good time to buy, but I think it's a little bit too early to tell. And obviously if you're not new to the channel, I update you guys on what I'm doing every single day. So make sure you turn on your bell notifications so that you can get the updates as soon as possible. I should have some sort of free Telegram where I kind of give you guys what I'm doing. So feel free to look for that. I think it should be like in my description or the links below, whatever. And yeah, share the video with a friend who's maybe going through it or doesn't understand crypto. And if you have any crypto questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section. So have a good day, guys, and trade safe.